Daily Fantasy Sports. I'm Dave Loughran. With me, Adam Scher. We've got a 15-gamer to break down, so we're getting off to an early start today, Adam. A lot to talk about, a lot of, whether you like them or not in terms of DFS purposes, a lot of really talented pitchers, a lot of high run totals, and the Rockies against Edwin Jackson.
Yeah, pretty wide open slate, I think. I'm looking forward to it. I like slates that you can kind of play whatever you want because ownership in some spots will be spread out. This for a 15-game slate, I think that there are a few spots where ownership will be a bit more concentrated than usual, though. So it'll be a fun one to talk about.
Let's dive right into it. Again, a ton of games to get to, so we're happy to have you with us, and we're going to get through 15 games here in about an hour and 15 minutes. We'll kick it off in New York with the Yankees and Boston Red Sox coming off a game yesterday that was postponed. We've now got Chris Sale. We have J.A. Happ. Same matchup as yesterday. We'll get into the hitting matchup here, but let's start with Sale. He would have been a whole lot more popular yesterday. It's not to say that he's getting no ownership today because he's still going to get some, 17% projected on DraftKings, on FanDuel. Sales coming in quite a bit lower, but people are always going to play him because he's good. What do you make of him, of this matchup for Sale at a pretty hitter-friendly park and against the Yankees team that is dealing with a lot of injuries but still has a decent amount of power scattered throughout?
Yeah, decent amount of power and not a ton of strikeouts. Missing Stanton and Judge is a downgrade from that standpoint. But still, of course, I like Chris Sale. I mean, I think that he's the best pitcher on the slate. And he has really been absolutely lights out since those first four starts of the season where he was getting no swings and misses on his fastball for whatever reason. Whatever changed at that point, he struck out 41% of hitters since then. His called strike plus swing strike percentage since then is basically tied with Blake Snell's for the season, which puts him, at first in the league. He's been absolutely amazing. The reason that it's hard to get to him today, for me, doesn't really have to do with the Yankees matchup. It has to do with how many good pitchers you have at the top. And while I do have Sale as the highest projected pitcher by a little bit, it's not by enough to where he's getting into, optimal lineups for me over, Trevor Bauer in particular, but also that range of pitchers that has Caleb Smith and Herman Marquez, and a handful of other guys.
Right, exactly. Although I will say the other side of this matchup is kind of interesting. J.A. Happ's allowed 13 homers to righties this season, 2.68 home runs per nine. He has really struggled with right-handed power. 13 of the 14 homers he's allowed have come against righties. And there isn't a pitcher on this slate that's allowed more homers to righties this season. The reason for that, the only pitcher in the league that's allowed more homers to righties overall, not just on this slate, is David Hess. So it's been an issue for Happ. And now he's going up against, a power-laden Red Sox team that's got plenty of power from the right side of the plate. JD Martinez coming in at a $4,700 price point on DraftKings, batting third. Mookie Betts in the leadoff, Bogarts cleanup, and then a very discounted Steve Pearce batting in the sixth hole. I'm obviously the Colorado Rockies are a priority today, but I do like some of this right-handed power for Boston.
Yeah, as do I. I think that they make for a good mini stack or a good, full stack if you're just looking to get away from the popular Colorado team. They are underpriced, and Happ really hasn't been missing bats this season. He was good in his last start, but for the most part, you're talking about a pitcher that looks a lot more like the J.A. Happ of, 2 to 3 years ago and most of his career than the last year plus. And that's a pretty dangerous spot to be in when you're allowing a ton of power to righties. You're not missing bats, and now you're going in to face, all these power righties on the Red Sox that, for whatever reason, are discounted. So, JD Martinez in particular, one of my favorite plays today. But you obviously you're not going wrong with Mookie or Bogarts or really anyone on Boston.
Yeah, I love JD Martinez here, but I equally, for different reasons, I really love Steve Pearce just because you're getting him at such a good price. He's one of those guys that bats a lot better with the platoon advantage. He's $2,900 on DraftKings, and it's so cheap on a site that usually doesn't price guys this low. $2,500 on FanDuel. Pierce over on Yahoo is what, $8. So I think batting sixth, Pierce offers good power upside at a really cheap cost. Is there anything else in this game you want to talk about? For me, it would be Sale if you can get to him. I don't see it as a priority. And Boston righty power.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too. Like I love getting the Sale if you can, like you said,
Right.
but there's a pretty to me the line to where I wouldn't feel comfortable dropping too much a hitter is it's a pretty thin line where I can just save the money at pitcher. The one thing that's worth pointing out is that on FanDuel, like we always have cheap hitters, but with it being a 15 game slate and having some under priced teams, like you can stack some pretty decent teams and get to Chris Sale if that's what you're trying to do.
Right. No question. Talk to me about Baltimore and San Francisco. You have Andrew Cashner and Drew Pomeranz on the mound. Totals in this game are relatively low given the pitchers on the mound. Right now you've got a 4.7 total for the San Francisco Giants. I mean, it's actually not low given how bad this team is. And then on the other side for the Baltimore Orioles, you're at 4.5. I want to talk about Giants bats here, but let's start with Drew Pomeranz, who I know you have some interest in, is $6,000 on Yahoo and has a pretty average 22.5% K rate against righties, which, should be able to get the job done if you're trying to get Colorado bats in the order. What's your take on Pomeranz here at a cheap price on a night where you're going to need one cheap pitcher on these two pitcher sites?
I think it's obviously dangerous because it's a pretty big part downgrade for a pitcher who's really struggled with power this year, even though, he makes his home starts in San Francisco. He's allowed a 283 ISO to righties, a 424 WOBA. He has not been good, but he's really cheap. And the Orioles do have strikeouts in their lineup. The strikeout percentage at least has been there for Pomeranz. Like you said, he struck out 22.5% of righties overall this season. He's struck out about 23.2% of hitters overall. So at least it's not like he's, fallen off a cliff as far as strikeouts go. He's someone who I think has always had a really fine line as far as if he's good or bad, because he's always been one of the league leaders in called strikes. And he really relies on, kind of freezing pitchers with that, or hitters with that curveball. If he's not locating it well, or he's not getting ahead in counts, it's really tough for him to have success. But it's a Baltimore team that does have some strikeouts. And if he is on his game and able to get ahead and locate pitches, they're not a good enough offense where I expect them to succeed. They're basically an offense that hits mistakes, and so if he's bad, they'll punish him. But if he's got decent stuff, they won't do much. So I think that the price tag is just a little bit cheaper than it should be. I like getting the Pomeranz as an SP2.
I agree with you. I mean, I don't like it, but I think it's necessary. Baltimore will strike out. They're better against lefties than righties, but still, he's very cheap, and sometimes you just got to bite the bullet. And in a spot like this, Drew Pomeranz can definitely give you some value. What are your thoughts on these Giant bats going up against Cashner? Because if there's one thing is that they're cheap. Really bad catcher position. Buster Posey's very, very inexpensive. He's had a horrible season, no question, but it's also Cashner. It is a good park shift, and I think, looking throughout the bulk of this lineup, they're all really inexpensive. Yastrzemski batting second. Do you have any interest here if you're paying up, say, for two pitchers in looking at San Francisco bats?
I mean, the park shift alone makes it kind of interesting because they do let you pay up for two pitchers. The thing with Cashner that's interesting is that he's been legitimately good against lefties this year. He's struck out just shy of 22%. He's held them to a 288 expected WOBA with virtually no power. Not that they have a lot of power in this lineup anyway, but 4 out of the top 5 hitters here are left-handed, 5 out of the top 7. Posey is a shell of what he used to be as a hitter. Longoria is not as good as he used to be, but he does still hit well outside of San Francisco. So if Cashner is bad, it's a high upside spot because I'm still not sold on Cashner suddenly being a legitimately good pitcher against lefties, but he has been so far. The Orioles bullpen adds some, upside as well. I don't think I get to a lot of San Francisco because there are so many cheap pitchers that I have interest in. But if you were looking to go like Sale, Bauer, then getting this team at cheap price tags, kind of moves toward the top of the list. Even though Cashner has been good against lefties, I still like Brandon Belt just because he's a good hitter and gets the park shift. And then going to, a cheap Posey at catcher or Longoria at third base, I think are both reasonably good options too.
Yeah, I think the Posey catcher is just so bad. That I really don't have an issue with Buster Posey there, batting towards the top of the order. Are you interested in Cashner?
I don't hate it if I get him in a lineup, but I would rather have Pomeranz, who's a little bit cheaper. I'd rather have Tyler Mahle, who we'll talk about. And then I'd rather have, a little bit more expensive price tag. I'd rather have Yu Darvish, Danny Duffy. So I don't think that I get Cashner.
And I know that you have some interest in Pomeranz. So do I. But will you be getting to any Baltimore bats here?
Trey Mancini is the one that stands out to me because Baltimore's pretty expensive overall, but you have Mancini at just 4,600 on DraftKings. He's like a legitimately good hitter in the middle of this lineup. He had a down year last year, dealt with injuries most of the year, but 2 years ago, he had a breakout year with, I think it was a 118 WRC plus. So far this year, he's at about 129. If you chalk last year up to injuries, he's been a well above average hitter. So I think the price tag is pretty appealing on him in particular. Outside of that, it's not a stack that I expect to get a whole lot of exposure to just because they're not really even saving me much money over a Colorado stack in most spots.
Hanser Alberto's batting leadoff with the platoon advantage at 2,600 on FanDuel. I don't think that's all that bad. The problem with that is that, a guy like Ryan McMahon is $3,400, which is also pretty tough to get away from, assuming he's batting sixth. But yeah, $2,600. I really don't hate that.
You also probably have Jason Kipnis batting cleanup at 2,700 against Covey.
Right. Yeah. So there's a bunch of different. I mean, Kipnis is not good, but
neither is Alberto.
Covey's work. Well, no, he's not. But he's leading off,
yeah.
And at a really good park. So at least there's a couple things in his favor here. I'm not saying that he's a significantly better play than Kipnis. Just that leading off at this spot, you could do worse.
Yeah, sure.
Pittsburgh, Milwaukee. We've got Chris Archer, Ulyss Chassin. Chassin's price has bottomed out, man. It's funny because this was a guy who, for a good amount of years was actually not bad against righties. This season, righties have hit him pretty hard. He's allowed a good amount of power to them. Lefties, unsurprisingly, have battered him pretty good, but that's something, you kind of expect to see in the power department, at least. He has a -1% K- BP rate. And then on the other side, Chris Archer's walk problems have just completely crippled his ability to produce any worthy fantasy points. Like, normally, if this wasn't the issue, I'd have interest against the Brewers just knowing that Chris Archer can get strikeouts. He's still, a K per inning guy, but you're looking at like 6 walks, 2, 4, 3, 2, 2. That was a lot better earlier in the year, but recently it's been brutal. He struggled to work deep into games. 5 innings. It seems like his ceiling right now. What's your take on the pitching matchup? It's a great park, but man, Archer doesn't give us much to get excited about.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good park. It's two teams that don't have a ton of strikeouts, especially Pittsburgh. Chassin doesn't get a lot of strikeouts on his own, and you have a lot of lefties for the Pirates. So the only thing really working in Chassin's favor is how inexpensive he is. He wouldn't be the worst $5,300 pitcher that I've rostered this week, but I don't think that it's totally necessary here. As far as Archer, I'm kind of intrigued because of the Milwaukee lineup. The walks have, of course, been an issue for Archer this season, but Milwaukee's only running 3 lefties out there, Yelich, Moustakas, and Grandal, all obviously very difficult outs. But if he can get through that top 5, you get strikeouts from Keston Hiura, you get strikeouts from Aguilar, you get Orlando Arcia, and then you get the pitcher Chassin. So it's not the worst lineup, but I still just don't think I get to a whole lot of Archer because the top is just so scary here.
I don't know if you noticed, but his first 3 starts, first 4 starts really, he wasn't using the 2-seamer. He's throwing it a lot lately, 20% over his last 4 games. Not saying that puts you on him or takes you off of him, but it's interesting to see that the walks have increased to such a high rate. It might be worth looking into to see if it has anything to do with that pitch. He's increased the usage on it exponentially for whatever that's worth. It's kind of interesting though, and I mean it's gotten hit pretty hard, but he still has the swing and miss stuff. It's not that Chris Archer can't miss bats. His slider can still get swings and misses. The fastball, the 4-seamer really hasn't at all this season. I guess the question would be, like, if you're playing 20 lineups, do Do you get much Archer? Because for me, I probably just get to Darvish in that range, even though his walk problem has been horrible too.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I have a dummy crunch going right now with just my baseline projections, and I'm not getting to much Archer. I'm actually getting to more Chassin just because of the price point, but that's something that I think will go away by the time I get my final projections done too. I'm actually getting more Milwaukee Bats because the top of the order is reasonably priced. You do have, nice price tags on guys like Moustakis and Grandal in particular.
I had Chassin as a pretty good value actually, but it's tough to pull the trigger there, man.
Yeah, I think he's a good value. It's just what's the ceiling,
Right.
and
Pomerantz is so much is comparable price, better overall matchup from a strikeout standpoint. And while neither of us would argue that Pomerantz is a great pitcher, he's probably still better than Ulyss Chassin.
Yeah. Also worth pointing out that two of the four worst K minus BB percentages are in this game.
Is that right?
Yeah. Chassin is second worst, only better than Dylan Covey so far this season.
Overall?
On this slate.
No. Overall meaning lefties and righties?
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. Chassin has struck out 17.5% of all hitters this year. He's walked 10.4%. And Archer has struck out 21.7% and walked 13%.
That's just brutal. Yeah, Chassin has a negative K minus BB rate against lefties. So that's not going to get you very far. It's funny too because Chris Archer, his swinging strike stuff's not bad. 11.5%. It's fine, but outside of that, it's been brutal. He's walking righties at 17%. My God. Yeah, that's just terrible. Do you like any hitters here?
Grandal and Moustakis.
Yeah.
Like I would like Josh Bell, but he's just so expensive that I don't really want to get to him.
Almost verbatim what I was going to say. Like it's a good spot for Josh Bell. But are you playing Josh Bell or Arenado? Right. Or Trevor Story?
Yeah, exactly. Or Ryan McMahon or Daniel Murphy for 1,000 less.
Exactly. Right. Yeah, I wasn't talking about the same position, just in terms of if you're paying a premium for hitters. Right. Yeah. No, I totally agree. Tampa Bay, Minnesota. But these, by the way, these first few games we're getting through pretty quickly. That we're gonna slow it down a little bit once we get to a few games in the middle of the pack. There are a lot of games that you can kind of, I don't want to say wipe off the slate, but not pay a ton of attention to. Jose Barrios, Jalen Beaks, probable long reliever here with Ryan Stanek as your opener. Adam, I mentioned this on the Early Bird podcast today with Dan Strafford. You can listen to that every night, by the way. It comes out or between, 10 and midnight, and you can listen to it the next morning if you'd like before the strategy show, whenever you'd like, previewing the next day's slate. Jose Barrios is good, and I know you have a lot of respect for him, and so do I. But the kind of the big thing here with Barrios is while he's definitely a good pitcher, he is not in the same ballpark as your Trevor Bauers or even your Herman Marquez. Not talking about the slate. Forget about the slate or the matchup. In terms of strikeout stuff, he's good at limiting runs, but he's got a 10% swinging strike rate. He's a guy that each year is going to strike out between like 23, 24% of batters. He's good, but he's not elite. And oftentimes he's priced as an elite pitcher, and people wonder why they're disappointed. On a slate like today, it's kind of hard for me to argue in favor of Barrios when, unless he's going 8 innings deep, it's unlikely that you're going to see a big game from him. And he struck out double-digit batters once this year. That was his first start of the season. He has one other game with more than 7 strikeouts on the year.
Yeah, and it's not like it's the easiest matchup. It's a good park, but
Tampa's good, yeah.
Yeah, Tampa Bay's got some power. Out of all starters that have thrown at least 750 pitches this season, Barrios is 45th with a 29.2% called strike plus swinging strike percentage. He ranks 25th out of qualified starters in PCRA, so he's good. It's just, I don't think that he's in the same category as, a lot of other pitchers. Even you mentioned it with Bauer, like Barrios has had a better season than Bauer has, but Bauer brings more strikeouts to the table. And that's what you're looking for in DFS. For the season, Barrios has struck out 22% of hitters. his walk percentage is all the way down to 3.8%,
Yep.
which is really, really good. But you don't like, I would trade more strikeouts or more walk. I would give up walks for strikeouts with basically any pitcher in DFS. Like your risk gets a little bit higher, but so does the reward. You're talking about Barrios being the same price point as Bauer and having a 6.5% or 5.5% lower strikeout percentage. But on top of that, just when you're talking about upside, he's way more expensive than Yu Darvish, who has the 5th highest strikeout percentage on the slate. He's more expensive than Wheeler, who is right behind Darvish. There are just so many pitchers that have higher strikeout percentages than Barrios.
Right, exactly. And one thing that I reference a lot, I think you would agree, pitchers like Bauer have the ability to mitigate runs and base runners. And maybe long innings with strikeouts, right? I mean, we've seen Bauer go 5 innings, give up 3 runs, and still have 10 or 11 strikeouts where you're like, okay, not the best, but he didn't kill me. The days that Barrios is giving up 3 or 4 runs, you're going to be disappointed almost always with his performance, especially on a 15-game slate.
Yeah, in general, that's why I love strikeouts so much because, not only obviously do they keep the ball from being in play and take away, bad luck hits and stuff, but if you give up a home run and you're a high strikeout pitcher, there's a good chance that your next at bat just immediately wipes that home run off the board if it was a solo shot.
Yep.
If you're someone that is a mediocre strikeout pitcher, as Barrios has been this year, it's harder to do that. We'll talk about that also when we get to like Miles Michaelis, who grades out as a good point per dollar play, but if he gives up a couple home runs, how is he making up those points?
He's not.
People like to look at matchups like they try and talk about safety, like, they're facing a bad team, it's safe. The easiest way to get a quote unquote safe pitcher that, is going to at least get you some points is a guy that strikes out a lot.
Absolutely. Exactly. Like, I'll take a good pitcher against a good hitting team that strikes out at a high clip over a good pitcher against, or over, I'll take any pitcher with some strikeout upside against a team that has a lot of punch outs than a team that isn't good but also doesn't strike out very often. We'll get to Joey Lucchese shortly. Probably a good case study for that. But yeah, it's not even really a preference thing. You said like that's why I prefer. If you're doing it the right way, like where the upside comes from, and it's easier to predict the strikeouts than it is a pitcher going 8 innings and not allowing any runs. You know what I mean?
Anything that takes like some of the luck aspect out of the performance for your player is preferable.
Exactly. Right. Like a bloop single over the shortstop's head that would be an out almost any of the time that wasn't hit hard ends up with 2 runs. If you're Barrios, it's hard to make up for that. Obviously not as hard as it is for Michaelis, but I'm talking about in that range of pitchers that are 9K and higher.
Exactly.
Barrios has a much tougher time doing so. Jalen Beaks on the other side of this, and we've discussed this. He's been really good, man. Like, I love what I've seen from Beaks. He's allowed 1 home run on the season. He's about a K per inning guy, and he threw 91 pitches last time, 83 the time before that. But I seriously still have zero idea what we're getting from him. And on a slate with so many pitching options, I don't see the need to go there. Do you disagree?
I feel like you can just make a flow chart for pitchers against the Twins, and if Astudillo is hitting in the middle or the top of the order, you just go straight to no.
Right.
And if he's not in the lineup, you still probably go to no because they're really good. But
I went with, as we talked out at the end of our show yesterday, I think both of us kind of like came to similar conclusions. I ended up with a lot more Morton than I initially thought I would with no Astudillo and a lot less Carrasco. Similar situations today with Bauer, but Astudillo being out of the lineup is only 1 hitter. It certainly makes a difference, though.
Yeah, and I mean, it would be one thing if the rest of the lineup had a bunch of strikeouts and wasn't good, but
right.
Not the case here.
Morton still only struck out 6, but he went 7 strong.
Yeah, and then you have whatever potential risks with Jalen Beaks. So there's a lot of pitching on this slate.
I don't like hitting in this game really at all, though. Do you have bats?
I don't like this game at all. No.
Okay. No, well, we already discussed not liking pitching. You do have some interest in this next game, Cincinnati and Washington. Tyler Mahle on the bump for the Reds, and on the mound for Washington is Patrick Corbin. It's funny, you would originally suspect, oh, well, Corbin's the pitcher we want to talk about here. Well, Tyler Mahle, I don't know how many times you and I have said it on the Deeper Dive over the years, but he's never been bad against righties. He was just flat out garbage against lefties for such a long time, and he hasn't been great this year. But Adam, he has a 31% K rate against righties this year, and you've got Patrick Corbin. I'll count him as a righty. He's got 34% career strikeout rate against righties. 1, 2, 3. So only 3 lefties here in this lineup, and the pitcher. Molly's pretty cheap. It's a bad park, but explain to me. I just gave a couple reasons there, but add on to why you have interest in him tonight.
Yeah, it's still not a great strikeout matchup because a lot of the Nats hitters don't really strike out a lot. But I just think that this is a spot where the price point on Tyler Mahle is a lot cheaper than his talent level. I think that he's an above average pitcher. He still has pretty nasty splits as far as what he gives up to lefties compared to righties, as you mentioned. But, Eaton doesn't have a ton of power. And then Soto and Adams, as long as he can keep their home runs to solo shots, he's cheap enough that it's okay. He has been not only striking out a ton of righties, but a 288 expected WOBA this season, 148 expected ISO. And if you look at some of the other stats that I'd like to look at, he
246 xFIP, by the way, a 246 xFIP.
Yeah, his PCRA this season is 40. He's 41st at 3.6. What do I have this?
Can you do me a favor? Quickly tell the view, because we've explained CSW, called plus swinging strike rate, and a lot of other stats that we've just began mentioning over the past month or so. Explain what that is and how it can be and how you utilize it.
Yeah, so it's basically xFIP, except where xFIP uses league average, like home run rates. PCRA uses barrels per batted ball, so it takes into account how the quality of the contact is against the pitcher, and it correlates a little bit better with ERA than xFIP does. It's a bit more predictive than xFIP as well. So
barrels are balls that were barreled, meaning hit squarely on the nose. Good contact. Go ahead.
Yep. Yeah, so it uses that. Normally, it's going to be pretty similar to xFIP, but like you'll see some guys where the xFIP's a lot higher than the PCRA, and it's because xFIP considers that pitcher is getting lucky as far as a suppressed home run rate usually. Whereas when you factor in, like if you look, he's just giving up a lot of soft fly balls, and that's why his home run per fly ball is lower than league average.
Right.
So Mahle ranks out of qualified starters this season. Mahle's at. I messed up my entire sheet, but Mahle has a 3.6 PCRA. For context, his ERA is 4.15, so it's better than his ERA. But he's sitting like right between Walker Buehler. He's right behind Walker Buehler and Eduardo Rodriguez, just ahead of Zach Wheeler and Domingo Germán. So he's in really good company there. Called strike plus swinging strike percentage, he is 14th out of all starters that have thrown at least 750 pitches this season. So he's sitting, right between Lucas Giolito and Carlos Carrasco at 31.9%. He has put up really good underlying numbers, and I just think he's a much better pitcher than his price tag, and it's a scary spot, so people aren't going to go there.
Right. Baseball Savant is where we get called plus swinging. If anyone's interested in looking up those numbers for themselves, where are you using PCRA?
Sixmanrotation.com has they made the stat. There's an article about it on there.
There you go. So here's my thing, Adam. When you look at this Nationals lineup, this year against righties, and some of them aren't the greatest samples, but most of them around like 150. Victor Robles, Juan Soto. Let me make sure he's in the lineup, because no Dozier today, right? Yeah,
no
Dozier. Robles, Soto, Adams, Corbin. All of them are going to strike out at a high rate. So the top of that lineup is pretty brutal, and Soto is good, and he's a lefty. But towards the bottom of the lineup, you do have some strikeout upside here. So it's just hoping that the damage is limited early on at the top of the order.
Yeah, and by all means, get Juan Soto and Matt Adams into your lineups.
No doubt about it. Yeah, absolutely. They're really good plays today, even if you like Tyler Mahle. It's a great point, man. What are your thoughts on Corbin?
I just can't bring myself to get to him where he's like he's the most expensive pitcher on DraftKings at 11 too. I can't bring myself to pay more there than for Sale. Sale's 53 on Yahoo, and Corbin is 51. So like it's a little bit more appealing, but he's still more expensive than Bauer, which is tough. He's still more expensive than some other pretty good pitchers on this slate. It's really tough for me to justify rostering Corbin in a tough park and with as many options as we have.
I agree. And it's funny because when it comes to a guy like Corbin, it's fun. Yesterday I was like, oh yeah, with Ryu, generally you're not going to get those huge games. He had like 32 fantasy point game yesterday, but he also threw 106 pitches. He hasn't been nearly as limited. If there's one thing about Corbin that is at least encouraging is that this guy can pretty much throw as many pitches as he needs. Go out there as many pitches as he needs to get through 6 or 7. But I'm with you. It's really tough to get there, even though he's been spectacular this year. And from a fantasy standpoint, not many pitchers have had, similar ups or the same upside as Corbin. I mean, across the board, he's been outstanding. But it is kind of tough to get there. And I don't know, you're talking about a Reds team that from an offensive standpoint, they aren't good, but I think you'd agree there's a lot better strikeout matchups on this slate.
Yeah, no question. And even as far as you said about Corbin throwing a lot of pitches, that's something that I do think is important and tends to go overlooked at times.
Yeah.
But on this particular slate where you have Chris Sale, Trevor Bauer, Zach Wheeler, as the first 3 that come to mind,
exactly.
They all throw a ton of pitches too.
Yeah, Bauer's thrown like 120 or more in like 3 of his last 5 starts.
Right.
So yeah, it's really not something. On some slates that would stand out.
Exactly.
Not on this one. But I did want to stress, just because we have some interest in Molly, guys like Soto and Adams are still really appealing. And you know what? A national stack isn't the craziest idea. You are at Great American Ballpark. It is around like 80 degrees there. Like it's still a favorable park. So, if the Nats went off and put some runs on the board, I wouldn't be surprised. Do you have any other interest in hitting here? Is someone like Suarez in play for you, or is it just one of those slates where it's so tough to get there?
It's just really tough for me to get to Cincinnati. I agree with you on Washington. The lefty's obviously the priority, but in lineups where you don't have Molly, there's no reason to have no Nat stacks because they're in Great American. But for the Reds, I mean, they're facing a good pitcher in Corbin. It is an absolutely terrible Washington bullpen behind them. So if somehow they get to Corbin early, There is a ton of upside. But, out of 30 teams on the slate, I think the Reds are, one of the lower probability teams. And they're inexpensive, which is nice. But there's other spots that I would prefer if I'm looking to go cheap.
Let's talk about the Atlanta Braves and the Detroit Tigers. Mike Foltynewicz, Spencer Turnbull. Folty coming off his first and only quality fantasy performance of the season. His four-seam velocity was up to 96 again. He's $8,500 on DraftKings. On FanDuel, he's coming in at $73 and $7,300. Sorry, and 44 on our sponsor Yahoo. Which, if you haven't checked it out yet, you definitely want to do so. And we'll drop a link in the YouTube chat in order for you to sign up to get up to $30 in Yahoo Sports rewards points, which you can use on the site as real currency to win more money and to be able to withdraw that money if you would like, or continue to play it. But it is real, and you can use it on the site to win real money. And over at Yahoo, look, the management fees are lower than anywhere else. We have contests where there's zero management fee, like the $3 guaranteed prize pool they've been running out there recently, filling quickly, but a really solid one. Only 10 max entries. You're not going up against 150 MME sharks. It's a different atmosphere over there. And for anyone that likes building lineups by hand and just enjoys that aspect of DFS, Yahoo's Daily Fantasy Sports really is the best place to do it. And use the code AWESOMO when you sign up. Again, use our link, AWESOMO, and get up to $30 in Yahoo Sports rewards points when you do so and deposit. That's Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, sponsor of the Deeper Dive. All right, Adam. Mike Foltynewicz. We know he's good. I don't think he was as good as last year, and he certainly wasn't as bad as he got off to this year through his first 4 or 5 outings. But he's definitely going to garner some ownership today. He is currently on DraftKings, your 3rd highest projected pitcher. On FanDuel, a one-pitcher site where he's very cheap, he is the highest projected pitcher And then over there on Yahoo, Fulte's coming in at 20%. That's your fourth highest projected pitcher. So ownership everywhere. He is good. It is the Tigers, and there are a lot of strikeouts. But he has only shown one really solid performance. I'm of the belief that we'll probably see more of the Fulte last week that we saw going forward, the good version. But where do you stand on a guy like this who's going to be popular and has had one good start on the year?
I think the field's more or less got it correct here.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing with him was just that his fastball velocity had really been down this year. He wasn't getting any strikeouts. Everything looked, pretty bad for him. His velocity has shot up 2 starts in a row. He averaged 95.4 miles an hour 2 starts ago in a tough spot against Milwaukee. 95.9 in his last start against Seattle or St. Louis, which again, it's a right-handed heavy team, but it's still a tough matchup. That was by far his best strikeout game of the season. And now you're getting a Tigers team that is predominantly right-handed, doesn't have a lot of good hitters, strikes out a lot. The numbers this year are awful, no question about it. But if this were last season and we were talking for sure about the same pitcher, we'd be talking about him being, like $9,800 in this spot. So you're getting a discount on him. And I know he's going to be popular, but I'm fine still getting there. If you go and look back, just last season at his numbers against righties, just a 259 expected WOBA, a 104 ISO allowed, 26.9% strikeout percentage. It's easy to forget because it was like the first year that he had really done it, but he was legitimately good last year against everyone. So it's not like, you're overpaying for the matchup here or anything if you think that Fulte is back to being normal.
Right. And I think he probably is. When it came to Chris Sale, we were really focusing on, is he missing bats with the 4-seamer? With Fulte, all I wanted to see was the velocity tick back up. Because when you're someone like him that relies so heavily on that pitch, 93, 94 isn't going to cut it. So I'm with you. I don't see it being a spot where, like, if you don't have Fultonevich, you're in trouble. But in terms of cash games, he makes for a great cash game play. Tournaments too, but definitely in cash. Him and Bauer are the most sensible options. But I mentioned this to you today on Slack, on DM. I do think if there was ever a slate, and I think we might disagree a little bit on this. I do think if there was ever a slate where you could get a little bit different, when we know Colorado hitters are just going to be wildly popular and for good reason, and I want to play a lot of them, I do like some of the other pitching options in the 8 and 9K range, maybe low 10K range, that right now are garnering like no ownership at all. But I think we're probably on a different page there.
No, I mean, I think my game plan is probably to be more concentrated on hitters and then spread out pitching exposures on the slate, just because I do think there are so many good pitchers. So, I mean, I agree with you there. I think we might just disagree on which pitchers it is.
That would be true. Yeah, I think you're right. All right. Spencer Turnbull on the bump for the Tigers. You're not playing him, I'm assuming. So
No.
Do you have any interest in hitters?
Not really. It's a tough spot when you look into, actual match, like, hitter by hitter matchups. Obviously you can make the argument that if Atlanta gets to Turnbull, then they get a lot of good matchups throughout the rest of the game because the Tigers bullpen's bad. But if you just kind of think about what Turnbull struggles with, he's a lot worse against lefties than righties. He struck out almost 30% of righties this year. He's done a really good job of limiting production against them. And the top part of this Atlanta order, Acuna, Swanson, Donaldson, Riley, they're all good, but they're all right-handed. Freeman is really good and left-handed, so he'd be the guy that I single out the most here. Markakis is left-handed, but not normally a guy that you're really singling out in, for DFS purposes. So it's kind of tough for me to get to a lot of Atlanta for those reasons.
Yeah, I'm with you. Really not a game outside of Fulte that I have a whole lot of interest in. We can move on, though, to Texas and Kansas City. Danny Duffy, Ariel Jurado on the mound. I'll say quickly that I think Jurado is due for some serious regression. He does get a lot of ground balls, but he doesn't miss bats. And at Globe Life, I expect that to catch up to him sooner or later. Danny Duffy, on the other hand, is somebody that you had mentioned earlier today you have interest in. So, floor's yours.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a good park, and it's a dangerous matchup against Texas, but there are strikeouts in this lineup. There are some lefties, although I think Texas ran out. Yeah, they ran out as ready heavy lineup as they could. So got my Duffy projection down a little bit. Kiner Falefa doesn't strike out either at the bottom, but you get Cabrera from his weak side. You get, three lefties in there, True, Mazara, and Gallo. Duffy's always been better against lefties than righties, as you would expect. Gallo does have a lot of power, or it does hit lefties well, though. So seeing this lineup, I'm a lot less interested in Duffy than I was earlier.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. And even a guy like Forsythe can hit lefties pretty well. Not like he used to. God, he used to just destroy them. I don't know what happened. But overall, it's a pretty scary matchup for him. I will say, though, the one thing for me when it comes to Duffy is, while I'm not interested in rostering him, I'm just not huge on Texas here because, number one, they're way better against right-handed pitching as a stack overall, as a team, and they're so damn expensive. Like, Pence, Gallo, and Chu are all 5,400 or more on DraftKings. Andrews is 48. These guys are not cheap at all. If you're playing them, you're going to be hard pressed to get any pitching you like, and you're probably going to have to stack like San Francisco bats with them, or just go super cheap with a Steve Pearce and a Derek Fisher. They're really pricey, man.
Yeah, they are. I would like to get to Joey Gallo as a one-off, but even there, it's really difficult to prioritize him in the outfield when there are so many outfield options on the slate that have big-time power for less money. You look to Coors, and you have David Dahl for $800 less on DraftKings than Gallo. It's really tough for me to get to Texas.
It really is. Kansas City's interesting, though. I mentioned that I do expect Jurado to experience some regression. You're talking about a guy that is getting virtually no swinging strikes against lefties, and that is something that matters to me. 5.4%, 13% strikeouts. Like, when you're putting balls in play at Globe Life, you need him to be ground balls, and he does get a good amount of ground balls. I'm not taking that away from him, but the fact that he's allowed no home runs yet and is really just limited power entirely, I don't expect that to continue. Then again, look, Royals aren't very cheap either. And for that reason, it's not one of my favorite teams. But I feel like I almost have more interest in the Royals than I do the Rangers if it's just 1-versus-1. What are your thoughts on hitting for the Royals bats today?
I was actually surprised how much Kansas City I got to in my initial crunch because of how expensive they are. When Josh and I talked about it this morning, I said that I would love to get to Kansas City, but that it would be really tough because of their price tags.
Right.
But I'm actually getting there, and I'm fine with that. Jurado has been pretty good so far in a very limited sample this year. But if you look at, his expected numbers, 281 expected WOBA to lefties, 335 to righties, not allowing a lot of power. But like you said, he's just not missing bats. And you're talking about really favorable hitting conditions, a Kansas City team that has plenty of power in their lineup, but also a lot of speed. It's a cheap enough bottom of the order where, you can get to a couple of the expensive guys at the top and then just round it out with cheap guys from Cuthbert down. So I'm getting the pretty good amount of Kansas City right now.
All right. Anything else on this one? I think we can move on.
Probably worth pointing out, not something that should really sway a whole lot, but it's a stat that you had mentioned to me recently. Kiner Falefa has been unbelievably bad at framing pitches. And you're talking about a pitcher in Jurado that doesn't miss bats. Normally pitchers like that rely on, kind of living around the edge of the plate and good command and getting, strike calls. If Kiner Falefa is taking strikes away from him and putting him behind in counts, it potentially could get, pretty ugly.
Yeah, dude, he has been bad, really bad. So if you take all of the catchers here and you look at their framing runs, if you go on Baseball Perspectives, essentially, how many runs have they saved or allowed based on their pitch framing? He's at minus 9.1. That's crazy. Wilson Contreras is second worst at 6.6. But Adam, you're talking about a guy that doesn't even catch every day. 9.1 runs responsible for because of framing is horrible. So you're right. That's a huge thing right there. And it helps opposing hitters for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's one little data point. It's not something that, you want to just be, I'm loading up on Kansas City because of that, but it's something that does not help Texas pitching.
No. And I had mentioned this, I don't know, a month ago or so that, like you said, it's not a it's not something you're like, oh man, now I got to jam all of the opposing bats in. No, but if you're on the fence, this is something that can make a difference. So, all right, Cleveland, Chicago White Sox, Trevor Bauer, Dylan Covey. It's funny, you mentioned the barreled balls per plate appearance that Carrasco had allowed this season, and we saw it yesterday, man. A lot of barreled balls, some just line drive doubles, home run to Yonder Alonso. It was another brutal one, man. He did get through 6 1/3, but he gave up 6 runs, struck out 7. Now you have Trevor Bauer on the mound for Cleveland. He has struggled lately. His walk rate has inflated exponentially. But he is still one of the highest upside pitchers in the league just based on his strikeout stuff, right? I mean, when you look at Trevor Bauer, you know that he could go out there and strike out 12 batters in 6 innings. It's just a matter of how many guys he's putting on base. But he also throws a ton of pitches, and he's allowed to do so, which is why right now he is one of the most popular pitching options across the board, or at least on DraftKings and Yahoo.
Yeah, I think most of his issues this year have been command related. He's his control has also sucked. Like, he's walking a lot of guys, but he also is making bad pitches in the strike zone. If you go on to Baseball Savant and look at percent of pitches thrown right down the middle this season, he is 8th out of, I think it was 8th. 8% of his pitches. He was, I think, 16th out of like all starters that have thrown 750 pitches. There were some good pitchers up towards the top, but also a lot of not very good pitchers. And I think that it's not surprising that if you look at percentage of barreled balls per batted ball event, Bauer's up over 10% this year. And a lot of it has to do with command and getting behind in counts as well. So that's where I think the struggles are, but he also does have really good strikeout stuff. He's still striking out over 27% of hitters despite struggling with control and command this season. And that's something that can be turned around, pretty quickly. It's something that he hasn't always struggled with. So it wouldn't be surprising to see, him kind of just figure something out and be really good going forward. The most important thing for me with Bauer is just the way the sites are treating his price. If you were talking about Bauer being like 10.5, which is probably, like that would be a reasonable price tag where you could say, yeah, I like Bauer. I don't know how much I'll get. But at 9,200 or, on Yahoo at I think 47 or 48, they are basically pricing Trevor Bauer to be what he has been for his first 10 or however many starts this season and throwing out everything that he's done over the last couple of years. So it's basically you're paying the correct price tag for this version, for the version you're getting this year. And there's some chance that he's still better than that. And that would make him just clearly underpriced.
Yeah, I agree. Now, so the reason earlier today when I talked to you about this, and I'm not pushing back on this at all, just providing kind of an alternate view, is because we pretty much could have and did say all of the same stuff yesterday about Carlos Carrasco. And we saw how that turned out. Now, that's one game. It's a different pitcher. Evidently, it's the same team, and it's coincidentally same team and same matchup. But I do think that if Bauer on a 15-game slate is going to be upwards of 30%, I'm not opposed to, like you said, spreading things out in tournaments. As good of a spot as this is, Trevor Bauer has definitely lacked, like you said, both command and control, and there's no guarantee that he rediscovers himself today. And if he doesn't, it's going to give you a sizable leg up on the field. Now, yesterday I really liked White Sox hitters. That I don't feel really the same way about it today. I feel like Trevor Bauer is more so going to put runners on with walks and get wild instead of Carrasco, who gives up a lot of power. But I'm still not totally opposed to getting away from Bauer. Not totally, but spreading it out. On a 15-game slate, almost 30% ownership is a lot for one pitcher, even on a 2-pitcher site. So I do think there are some great alternatives here if you're looking to be a little bit different and you're going to be loading up on popular hitters.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. And just to kind of put some numbers behind that too, looking at some of the pitchers in a comparable price range to Bauer on DraftKings. So I have Bauer with about a 30% chance of reaching the target score that I have for him in tournaments. I have Sale at about 23%, Wheeler around 25, Fulte around 25, Smith around 25, Barrios even at 20, even though I'm not, super high on Barrios.
Right.
There are plenty of options in this price range that have similar chances of success.
Exactly. And that's really all it comes down to. What are your thoughts on the Indians here against Dylan Covey? This dude is just absolute pure garbage, man. Rattle off any stat you want. It's probably bad if it's related to Dylan Covey.
Yeah, the guy's not good. The only thing that he really does well is
ground balls.
Yeah, ground balls. He's done a pretty good job of limiting power.
Imagine if he was a fly ball pitcher. He would just get destroyed every day, more than he already does.
Yeah. So I mean, since last season, he's allowed a 195 expected ISO to lefties, 140 expected ISO to righties. You prefer the lefties against him, and that's mostly what you're getting. Actually, other than Roberto Perez, that's entirely what you're getting today from Cleveland. So not a good spot for him there. And also a really, really cheap Cleveland team. I would expect that they come in as a really popular stack because you can do things like Bauer plus Sale or whatever. Right. You have Mike Freeman. So it's a tough stack depending on site because Freeman and Lindor are the same position. FanDuel, they're both shortstops. You can get to both. DraftKings, you can get to both because Freeman has multi-position eligibility. Yahoo, you have both at shortstop. So you can't stack both. You can't stack Cleveland with the 1 and 2 hitters on Yahoo. You can on FanDuel and DraftKings. But they're a pretty cheap stack. Jose Ramirez is 4,100 on DraftKings. He's obviously been really bad for a long time now, but I'm still not completely sold that he's just a terrible hitter because he's only 26 and there's no reason other than something mechanical that he would suddenly be just a bad hitter after years of being really, really good. Lindor is expensive, but you can save money with Freeman. Santana's expensive, but you save money with Kipnis batting cleanup. Bowers is really inexpensive. It's a pretty easy stack to get to.
It is. It definitely is. It's an Indians team that very frequently lets us down, especially away from home, but it's also Dylan Covey. So, I totally understand this, and there's not a lot of reason not to go there. Jose Ramirez, very cheap. You pretty much said it all. I don't need to follow much of that up. Anything else on this game?
Yonder Alonso is batting cleanup at 2,800 on DraftKings. Cheap across the industry. I think that if you are looking to get a bat against Bauer, that's where I would go.
All right. How about the Cubs and the Cardinals? Yu Darvish, Miles Mikolas on the mound. We kind of already discussed this earlier without actually talking about the game. When I'm looking at pitching to see if there's value, the one thing I look at is what kind of strikeouts can they give me, and relative to their price, what am I getting? Well, when you look at Darvish on this slate, Adam, he has the 5th highest strikeout rate, the 5th highest swinging strike rate, and the 7th highest called plus swinging strike rate. He is the 21st most expensive pitcher on DraftKings, or 9th cheapest, and the 11th or 12th most expensive pitcher on Yahoo. So he has issues. He has walk problems. He struggles to get deep into games, and the Cardinals are not a bad team. But if you're talking just about upside from a strikeout standpoint at $7K on DraftKings, there's no question that Darvish offers that. Compared to the field, he is too cheap, especially when you look at the price of other guys who are worse than him with less upside, with a lower ceiling, and are still significantly more expensive. That's where I stand on Darvish today. What about you?
That's where I am too. The Cardinals are a scary matchup, no question, but I am basically a strikeout whore in tournaments, and Yu Darvish has the 5th highest strikeout percentage on the slate behind Sale, Smith, Corbin, Bauer. So there's no one even remotely close to Darvish in price that has the same strikeout stuff that he does. He also has the highest walk percentage on the slate at 15.1%, yep, which is a problem, but he's been a little bit better lately. Over his last 3 starts, he's walked 0, 3, and 2. We haven't gotten any of those 6 walk implosions over his last few, at least. So hopefully he kind of figured something out. But, it's really just that the price tag makes up for a lot of the risk here. If you were just pricing him based off strikeouts, you would get him up, between 8 and 9K. And that's clearly not the case here. So I'm going to Darvish. I don't think it's necessary in cash games. Like you can just go to Fulte as your SP2, or you can go to Zach Wheeler, whichever you prefer. But in tournaments, I think that you get comparable upside, a lower probability of hitting it, a comparable upside for a cheaper price tag.
All right. What about Michaelis? I'm not really getting there, man, but he is cheap. I get that. Go ahead, because we've already talked about several cheap pitchers that we like, or at least have, like Darvish, Molly, Pomerantz. Where does Michaelis fall into this for you?
I mean, he's a really good point. He has a good point per dollar median projection, and that means that like I probably will get some just because he's really cheap. But what it also means is that he's probably going to be more popular than he should, because people pay more attention to median projections than range of outcomes when they make their lineups, and that is, I think, a mistake. But that basically means that because Michaelis projects for a little bit better median outcome than a lot of the pitchers around him, he's going to get a disproportionate amount of ownership, but he's not a high strikeout pitcher, whereas a lot of the pitchers priced around him do have more strikeouts because of their stuff. They're better strikeout pitchers. They're maybe worse pitchers as far as preventing runs, but when you talk about the points that you get from strikeouts compared to just getting outs, they have higher ceilings than Michaelis does, and they're going to come in at low ownership because they project slightly worse. So I don't think that I'll match the field on Michaelis. I expect to be underweight there. It's not like it's a Chicago team that's going to help him in the strikeout department either. They don't have a lot of strikeouts in their lineup. They do have some left-handed power. Schwarber and Rizzo in particular are good plays here. I don't think that Michaelis has a bad game. Like something like 13 to 14 points is a pretty reasonable expectation. It's just that I don't think he succeeds in tournaments as much as some of these other pitchers like Darvish do.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And it kind of follows the same theme we've had throughout the show, and kind of always on the deeper dive. So it would make sense that Michaelis isn't going to pop as an excellent play here. But I mean, I understand that he's cheap. It's fine. I just prefer the strikeout upside elsewhere. Do you like hitters here from this game? Like, because I actually don't think, especially if Darvish has a little ownership, Schwarber and Rizzo and Hayward, like, I kind of like the top of this lineup. Michaelis will struggle with left-handed power. What are your thoughts on hitters on both sides?
I like Schwarber leading off. The price tag's appealing. Michaelis gives up power to lefties, doesn't strike guys out. Schwarber has power and does strike out, so that's a spot that I normally like. It's a nice combination where the hitter has strikeout problems, but the pitcher doesn't take advantage of it. So I like that. If I'm going against Darvish, I don't mind taking some hitters here, because he does have, he definitely does have blow up potential. He walks a lot of guys, but also gives up home runs. So you could make a case for one-offing someone like Goldschmidt or Carpenter. They're cheap. Ozuna, just a really good power hitter. Or you could make a case for full stacking and just hoping that you get the Yu Darvish that walks 6 guys in 3 innings and leaves the game.
Yep, exactly. Definitely Schwarber. Michaelis on the season, 2.7 home runs per 9 to lefties. It's been a rough one. 401 WOBA, 293 isolated slugging, with an xFIP of 518. No bueno. All right, Colorado, Toronto, Edwin Jackson. You were talking barrel balls yesterday, and I thought to myself, what has Edwin Jackson done in that department this year? Well, if you look at barreled balls per plate appearance, 50 batted ball events minimum. Only Alex Cobb and Irvin Santana are worse than him this year. 14.1% barrel balls per plate appearance, and now he's got to go to Coors Field to face the Rockies. They have a 7.6 run total. Is that the highest total ever?
I think they had it the other day against Hess too.
I thought it was 7.3 or 7.4, but either way, super high. There's just no way to get away from this.
And the sites didn't do a good job of deterring you from going there either. I mean, you have Arenado and Story at like their normal, really expensive price points when they're in Coors, but
Dahl,
on DraftKings,
McMahon, Tapia, none of them are too expensive.
Story and Arenado are the only 2 hitters on DraftKings over 5K. That makes it pretty right. And then you consider the underpriced pitching that you have too, and you can do pretty much whatever you want. Like it's not difficult to either make Rocky stacks where you go cheap at pitcher and just get the best one-offs. It's not tough to get a little bit better pitching and take some value bats as one-offs. There's a lot of different ways to approach the Rockies. On Yahoo, also the only hitters over $20 are Story and Arenado. Everyone else is $18 or less. And it's a 15-game slate though, so like the Rockies are going to have ownership, no doubt about it. But enough people are going to go to other teams that I think there's a good chance that Colorado comes in under-owned compared to their percentage of being the top stack. I don't have our stack tool in front of me, but I imagine that's what it says. Because so many people are just like, you have to be contrarian. You can't play the Rockies.
Right.
Or,
Not
and
when Edwin Jackson's on the mound.
Well, and it just ignores that there's more nuance to it than that. You can be contrarian by playing the Rockies and playing the bottom of the order or something.
Right.
You can be contrarian by going to a different SP2 or a different pitcher than Bauer or both.
And that's what I was saying earlier with guys like Bauer. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And yeah, so it's, it's not just as simple as saying, people are going to play the Rockies, I have to go elsewhere. Especially when they're in a spot this good. So I'm going to be playing a lot of Colorado, and I just think that the other pieces in each Colorado team that I play will be lower owned or even better, highly leveraged pieces.
I also found it crazy that we're projecting McMahon for 5% ownership on DraftKings just because his price tag came out to 47. I mean, he's batting sixth behind Arenado and Dahl and dude, that's not too expensive in this matchup at all.
No, not at all. Everyone on the Rockies, Arenado and Story are correctly priced, maybe a little underpriced, and then everyone else is underpriced.
Yeah, it's crazy. Now I will say, I think the best way that these stacks work is you have one of Arenado or Story, and I haven't made lineups yet. But I feel like having one of Arenado or Story, and then rounding it out with 4 other Rocky bats shouldn't be that difficult. Both Arenado and Story seems tough. Do you have you made a bunch of lineups? And if so, do a lot of them have Arenado and Story in there?
I crunched some lineups while we were talking. They're all just 5-man stacks they're all naked 5-man stacks. But just scrolling through, it doesn't look like a lot of Arenado Story. Right. It looks like a lot of, Arenado Machado or Guerrero Story, where I do have the first Arenado Story lineup I see has Michaelis and Tyler Mahle. So that's what you'd be doing there, pitcher. I have one with Bauer and Chacin.
Yeah. Where are you at on Walters here? Because catcher it's a 15-game slate. Catcher's as bad as it always is. It's still horrible. He's up there in price. You're paying $4K for him, but is it worth it here against Jackson?
He's been better this season as a hitter. He's not the worst hitter in baseball anymore, but I still don't think I'll get to a lot because I'd rather just save money at catcher. You have Danny Jansen on the other side of this game, who is basically minimum priced. Oh, he's not in the lineup, but you have Luke Mahle, who's basically minimum priced with a bat in Coors Field. You have Buster Posey at a good price tag. So I don't mind getting the Walters in stacks, but as far as a one-off catcher or something, I don't think I'll have much.
I agree. All right, Adam, we got to speed it up a little bit here. Some of these games shouldn't take long, but before we do, talk to me, and I'm just going to let you run here. Don't take too long. Herman Marquez against the bad Toronto team, and then Toronto bats because of Marquez. Seems like DraftKings weighted that heavier than Coors because they're all very, very cheap here. Grichuk 37, Vlad Jr. 39. Stacking the Blue Jays is really cheap at Coors, but Marquez is also very good. So what is your take on this? Which side are you at, or either, or neither, I mean?
Depends on the site. On FanDuel at 7,500, I really like Marquez. We know there's strikeouts for Toronto. We know he's a good pitcher. On DraftKings and Yahoo, where he's similarly priced to Trevor Bauer and all those other guys we've talked about, it's tough for me to prioritize him. I would rather be going to some of the cheap power here. You have Guerrero and Grichuk. You have Kevon Biggio back in the lineup at a reasonable price tag. So Rowdy Tellez is also reasonably priced in the lineup over Justin Smoke. So I think that outside of FanDuel, I prefer getting to some of the Toronto bats at their price tags.
All right. Sounds good. Mets, Arizona, Zach Wheeler, Duplantier, John Duplantier. What do you got here? Anything?
Yeah, I mean, Wheeler is, I think, one of the more popular pitchers here. It's an okay spot against Arizona. They've been well below average against right-handed pitching this season. Wheeler is another guy that throws a ton of pitches and does have, pretty good strikeout stuff. He's a pretty good pitcher. It's similar to Fulte for me. They were coming in at a similar percentage in my lineups. How much I end up with will probably end up depending a lot on what our final ownership projections look like. On the other side, Duplantier is the third ranked prospect on the Diamondbacks, number 87 in all of baseball according to FanGraphs. But I don't see getting to him here because he's made 6 starts at AAA this season. He's thrown a total of 17 innings in those 6 starts. He's throwing like 65 pitches at most in those starts. He's made some relief appearances for Arizona at the major league level. I just would be surprised if he goes very deep into this game, and it's a slate that just has a ton of pitchers that will.
Right, I'm with you here. Do you have any hitting in this one?
No. If you're looking for a one-off against Wheeler, I would go Christian Walker because he's really cheap and he has a lot of power.
All right. Oakland and Houston, Brad Peacock, Mike Fiers. It's definitely off the board, and I get that, but I am not. I am going to have a little bit of Brad Peacock today, and I'll keep this short. He's projected to have less than 1% ownership. He's striking righties out at a ridiculous rate this season. He's looked outstanding recently. Now, one thing I don't love is that from a pitch count standpoint, he's been a bit limited, but he's gone 98, 93. I think if he needs to throw 100, he probably could. But he's looked awesome. I mean, he's looked really good. And some of them have come against teams that don't strike out at a high clip. I expect the A's to run out, 6 or 7 righties. So I get it. He's pricey, but no ownership projected at all, like literally unowned. I know we're on different pages here, but I'm tossing it out there. If it's a 7 or so righty lineup for Oakland, I wouldn't be surprised to see Peacock go out here and put up really solid numbers. And if Bauer does happen to have a rough game, it could come in handy. One of the ways I'll get away from, the chalky Rocky bats that I'm going to have a lot of. But anyway, thoughts on this game? Break it down in total because I can't imagine there's a ton of hitting. There is a value batter too, but go ahead.
Yeah, so Alex Bregman, especially on DraftKings at 4,400, stands out as a really good value. Fiers will give up power. It's not a good park for power, but Fiers, has some home run problems, and Bregman's just a really good hitter that should really never be that cheap. In those crunches, though, I was actually getting more Astros stacks than I expected, at least on DraftKings, because they are really, really cheap. You have Bregman, like I said, but you have Derek Fisher, Brantley, Gurriel, Reddick, Chirinos. Like these are all really cheap hitters. Tyler White's 2,500. So you can get, like Sale plus Bauer plus Astros or something. And that's a pretty good spot to be in, I think.
All right. Philly and the Dodgers, Kenta Maeda. This is another one, man. Like Maeda is so good, and he's so good against righties, and he's probably going to face 7 righties today, Adam. The only thing is, like, when it comes to Bauer and it comes to, I'll throw Corbin in there as well. Not that we're on him, but these guys all can throw a ton of pitches. It is a shame, though, because Maeda's another guy who is going to be entirely unowned. This surprised me. Even on FanDuel, let's see if it came up, where he's priced at what, like 8,900? 4% ownership, 8,900. Got a 31% career K rate against righties. I am interested in Kenta Maeda on FanDuel, especially given that he's projected to have less than 5% ownership, and the Phillies have one of the lowest totals on the slate. He's also a big favorite. What are your thoughts on this game?
I like Maeda's FanDuel price tag. I really like his DraftKings price tag. Or not DraftKings. I really like his Yahoo price tag. I absolutely hate his DraftKings price tag.
Yeah, it sucks on DraftKings.
Yeah, and the reason is, again, you're just talking about a pitcher that probably throws somewhere around 90 pitches, and he's, in the case of DraftKings, more expensive than guys like Bauer. He's almost as expensive as Sale. On Yahoo, though, you do get a discount off of those guys, which I think is really appealing because, like you said, Philadelphia does have a right-handed heavy lineup, and Maeda is really good at striking them out. So completely site dependent for me on him.
Yeah. We saw Dave Roberts pull him at 85 pitches, and he was lighting up the Padres. 12 Ks. He was almost through 7. I think he walked a guy. Or no, he allowed 3 total base runners, and I think he gave up 1 hit. Just ridiculous. But if Maeda comes out there, I wouldn't be surprised to see him mow down the Phillies. If you're on FanDuel or Yahoo, Maeda is not a bad pitching option whatsoever. I also think you could look at guys like Muncy and potentially even a lefty stack for the Dodgers here, Adam. Arrieta has not been good against lefties at all this year. At all. No strikeouts, a lot of power. It's not the craziest idea. And, guys like Muncy on DraftKings is actually seen his price tag come down. Do you have any interest in hitters from either side?
Yeah, give me the Dodgers. They're running like 6 or 7 straight lefties out there, 6 straight lefties, the top of the order.
Yep.
They also give you a cheap catching option in Will Smith. And Jake Arrieta has been really good against righties this year. He's been absolute trash against lefties.
Horrible.
Not missing bats, giving up power, 6.9% strike or swinging strike percentage, 14.5% strikeout percentage, 432 expected WOBA, 301 expected ISO to lefties this year. Those are expected numbers, so they're not
real bad.
They're not based on him pitching in Philadelphia and balls getting hit over the fence that wouldn't be home runs in LA. He's just getting absolutely lit up by lefties, and now you get all of these lefties with power. I love the Dodgers.
So do I, man. A lot. I mean, that lineup is as good as it gets for what we're trying to do.
Yep.
All right. 2 games to go. But by the way, if you want to check out awesomemode.com and you want to get more than just these live streams that we do, even though we provide a ton of value in these, use the promo code Deeper Dive, one word, when you sign up. One word, Deeper Dive. You get 50% off your first month. 50% off. The ownership projections, the player projections, the stack tool that we always reference, the lineup builder. There's the Fantasy Cruncher add-on, Fantasy Cruncher Pro, articles from Adam, myself, Josh Engelman, and so much more. Great PGA content from Ben Rasa, Jason Rosling, everything there. We got it all for DFS, and we'd love to have you come join the Awesemo family. And if you do, say what's up in the premium Slack chat where we're in there day and night. Use the promo code Deeper Dive. One word, Deeper Dive. And of course, you get all of Alex Baker, Awesemo himself, who is on this show, the Deeper Dive, from Monday through Wednesday with us. All of his content as well. You get 50% off using the promo code Deeper Dive. All right. Marlins at the Padres, Caleb Smith, Joey Lucchese. I'm just going to let you run with it, man. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, Lucchese, it's a nice spot as far as preventing runs, but not a lot of strikeouts for Miami against left-handed pitching. Lucchese's another one who, he threw, I think, 95 pitches last start, and occasionally he'll throw 95 to 100, but normally he's getting pulled a lot earlier than that. And on this slate, it makes it really difficult for me to get to him. I do have interest in Caleb Smith, though. Really, really good strikeout stuff, even against righties. And there are strikeouts in the Padres lineup. So I think that Smith is a good pivot to Trevor Bauer. He should be lower owned. He's similarly priced, has a better strikeout percentage. So I do like Smith. If you're not rostering Smith, though, I think looking to, in particular, Manny Machado and Franmil Reyes, 2 underpriced guys with a lot of power, especially in Reyes' case, that, the one thing Smith struggles with is he will give up power to righties when he's not striking them out. So I like both of those guys as one-offs.
I said the exact same thing in today's deep dive, dude. Machado's like 3,700 on DraftKings.
Yep.
Really cheap. And as much respect as you and I have for Caleb Smith, he will give up home runs here. And while Petco is not a great pitcher's park or hitter's park, it's better than Marlins Park. So yeah, I agree with those two. What about Joey Lucchese?
Yeah, just not enough. Not the slate for him. I don't think he's okay on Yahoo at $39, but on with one pitcher on FanDuel and at 89 on DraftKings, I just don't see getting there because I don't have enough confidence in him being allowed to go like 100 pitches. And then on top of that, Miami has a much lower strikeout percentage against lefties than righties.
I mean, it's 19 or so percent. It's low. Yeah. It's very low. All right, last one: Seattle and the LA Angels. Tyler Skaggs, Mike Leake. We're running out of time here, but I think that's okay. I'll let you break this one down in whole.
Not looking at the pitching outside of, maybe if you wanted to go $34 Skaggs on Yahoo, that's an okay price tag. It's a good park and everything, but not looking there on DraftKings or FanDuel. Not really looking to Mariners bats either. You can go to power righties if you want, but most of them are outfielders or first basemen, and there's just guys that I like a bit more. The one thing that really stands out to me in this game outside of Mike Trout is that Shohei Ohtani is still free. And I know people are really down on him because he hasn't been good this season, but you have to keep in mind that he's still below 100 plate appearances. He has like 56 at-bats against right-handed pitching. The stuff like ISO doesn't stabilize that fast. His line drive percentage is like 31% this year. His hard hit percentage is in line with last year. His strikeout and walk percentages are in line with last year. There's not a whole lot that I'm seeing that says there's anything wrong with him. So I'm going to keep jamming him into lineups.
Yeah, he's still good at baseball.
Yeah.
All right, top stacks, Adam.
Rockies, Dodgers, and Red Sox.
Yeah, those are the 3 I liked as well. In that order. Don't sleep on those Dodger bats, though. All right. That'll do it for us. Hey, before you leave and check out Live Before Lock, which is taking you up till 7:05, You're going to have Jake and Chris on today's show. Hit us with a thumbs up. Like the video if you enjoy the content and want to see more of it. We really appreciate it. It helps us out a lot. And you support us by doing something as small as that. Also, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you always know when content's going to drop next. Have a good weekend. Check us out, SiriusXM Radio, 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern, Saturday and Sunday. It's Awesemo Radio. Until next time, we'll be back on Monday. Deeper Dive. Peace. Good luck tonight.